Welcome to part 6 of our 5 tip series. 5 tips to protect your inventions. These 5 tips are helpful for our innovators who create new ways of doing something or build something new, whether it's a revolutionary new item or just a small fix that can make something better. They are all important in their own right, and they are ways that you can protect what you create. This is part 6 of our 5 tip series, where I'll be sharing 5 tips each week that are helpful for businesses, small to medium-sized entities, artists, innovators, designers, photographers, filmmakers, and essentially anyone who has an idea and wants to create and protect it. I'll be sharing 5 tips on how to level up and take your business or craft to the next stage, and most importantly, protect what you create. These tips are formulated from questions I am commonly asked and also from real-life client issues. If you missed the previous part, be sure to check it out on my YouTube channel, Teresa Kalu Law. When we think of protecting something we invent, we usually automatically think of patents. However, as we go through the tips, you will see that there are different ways besides patenting that can be used to help protect your inventions. We have so many innovative persons that are always creating new ways of doing things or finding an easier way to do something. And they sometimes don't realize that even if it's a small fix, sometimes they can have rights and protect and exploit these rights. So here are my 5 tips on how to protect your inventions. Tip number 1. Non-disclosure agreements. Sometimes when you invent something, there may be a need to share certain aspects of it with potential investors or manufacturers where you are planning to capitalize on your invention. Before speaking to anyone about your invention, ensure they sign a non-disclosure agreement before anything is discussed. This agreement bounds the other party to secrecy so that you can discuss your idea, or if you have created it already, your invention. You should be careful, however, when discussing a new invention. Even though you have a non-disclosure agreement, you should only say enough to give the other person an idea of what you are creating, but not actually how you do it. This is because while non-disclosure agreements are essential for these types of interactions, it is just a safeguard, and in reality, if someone does breach the confidentiality and steals your idea, you will have to first prove this, and secondly, go through costly and lengthy litigation or arbitration to do so. When using a non-disclosure agreement, also be mindful to label every document that has sensitive information as confidential to make it explicitly clear what information is sensitive. One last tip for the non-disclosure is to specify how long the confidentiality term in the agreement is meant to be, as these agreements should be specific about the duration of the obligations. Tip number 2. Patent your invention. This is typically the strongest type of protection you can get for your invention. Patenting gives you exclusive rights in a particular jurisdiction for your invention. So for example, if you invent a new drug that can prevent, let's say, a virus causing a worldwide pandemic, you can apply for a patent in every jurisdiction that you plan on producing this drug, and you alone would have the right to make this drug for the next 20 years. This essentially gives you a 20-year head start in the market. A patent is therefore a powerful tool that you can use to protect your invention and experience exponential benefits from it. While patenting is an excellent option, you would firstly need to meet the threshold for patentability. Essentially, your invention would need to be something new that is not obvious to the field and something that can be created. The requirement for an inventive step or something that is not obvious to the field is usually the hardest criteria to meet when applying for a patent. Another consideration that needs to be taken into account is the fact that Applying for a patent is not cheap. In fact, it can be a very costly process, and so you should ensure that your invention can be profitable if created. Where you do not have the funds to actually produce the invention yourself, however, you can always have the option to license it after obtaining the patent. One last thing to note is that while you are granted exclusive rights to exploit your invention, this exclusivity expires after 20 years, and after this, other persons can freely create your invention. When applying for your patent, you are required to disclose exactly how your invention works so others will be able to easily replicate this in the future. This is definitely something you should consider when deciding how to protect your invention. If you have created something that is very difficult to figure out and produce without your help, you may want to use tip number 3. Tip number 3. Keep it secret. When deciding on protecting your invention, you have to decide whether it's better to apply for patent protection or whether you can benefit more from keeping it as a trade secret. A trade secret has no formal protection and is only protected as long as it is kept secret. To protect something as a trade secret, you have to take specific measures to protect it and make sure that no one has access to the confidential information. This is an excellent option for inventions that cannot be figured out through reverse engineering. This way, as long as you keep it a secret, you can exclusively produce it without the 20-year limit that comes with patenting. More so, this is significantly cheaper to do as you don't have the costs that are associated with patenting. Some companies have benefited significantly from trade secrets. Right here in Trinidad and Tobago, we have Angostura bitters, which has been protected for so many years by trade secret. Coca-Cola and KFC have both famously benefited from trade secrets, and if you research the extent that these companies go to protect their trade secret, you will realize how careful you need to be when protecting your invention as a trade secret. Tip number 4. Utility certificate. A utility certificate is not usually a type of protection that is commonly used, but it can be very beneficial depending on the type of invention. I consider the utility certificate to be somewhat of a baby patent. With a utility certificate, you are granted exclusivity just as with the patent, but this exclusivity is only valid for 10 years. The difference between a patent and a utility certificate is that whereas in a patent, you need to have an inventive step, which essentially means a non-obvious step in the field, with utility certificates, this step is not required. As I said earlier, this is usually the hardest step to prove, and so it is a great option for persons that cannot meet this criteria. With this option, like with patents, you have to disclose how you do it, but you get exclusive protection for 10 years, and the cost to get a utility certificate is much cheaper. It is also a quicker and easier process, and so it is a good option for innovators. I don't see a lot of innovators using this option, but it's actually a great option to consider, particularly so where you cannot meet the criteria for patentability, but you also have an invention that can be easily reverse engineered, so it would not be effectively protected by trade secret. Tip number 5. Trademarking. This is not a direct way to protect your invention, but it can help to protect your product when 1. Your patent or utility certificate expires, 2. Where your trade secret is discovered, or 3. Where you have an invention that cannot be protected under the previous options. Having a strong trademark in connection with your invention can be very helpful to protect the integrity of your invention. Where you apply a trademark to your invention, persons would immediately be able to recognize your product and trust its quality. Therefore, even if your patent or utility certificate expires, persons who trust your quality and reputation will continue to support your product rather than another new product that comes into the market. Also, if you are protecting your invention by trade secret, They will continue to support your brand and associate your brand with the product even if someone new starts to produce it. This has worked out well for companies. An example of this is GlaxoSmithKline's Panadol brand. Panadol is really paracetamol, but the use of the brand Panadol has helped GlaxoSmithKline to continue to monopolize the market even after the patent for paracetamol expired. This is because consumers trusted the brand and its quality. Trademarking is therefore an excellent means to extend the life of a product past patent or utility certificate expiration dates. Those are my 5 tips for this week. I hope that it helps our innovators to protect what they create and understand all the options available to them. I mentioned non-disclosure agreements in tip number 1, and next week I'll be going a little more into non-disclosure agreements. So be sure to tune in. Until next time.